Chapter 1. In the winter of my 16th year, my mother decided I was depressed, presumably because I rarely left the house, spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time to thinking about death. Whenever you read a cancer booklet or website or whatever, they always list depression among the side effects of cancer. But in fact, depression is not a side effect of cancer. Depression is a side effect of dying. Cancer is also a side effect of dying. Almost everything is, really. But my mom believed I required treatment, so she took me to see my regular Dr. Jim, who agreed that I was veritably swimming in a paralyzing and totally clinical depression, and that therefore my meds should be adjusted, and also I should attend a weekly support group. This support group featured a rotating cast of characters in various states of tumor-driven unwellness. Why did the cast rotate? A side effect of dying. The support group, of course, was depressing as hell. It met every Wednesday in the basement of a stone-walled Episcopal church shaped like a cross. We all sat in a circle right in the middle of the cross, where the two boards would have met, where the heart of Jesus would have been. I noticed this because Patrick, the support group leader and only person over 18 in the room, talked about the heart of Jesus every freaking meeting. All about how we, as young cancer survivors, were sitting right in Christ's very sacred heart, or whatever. So here's how it went in God's heart. The 6 or 7 or 10 of us walked/wheeled in, grazed at a decrepit selection of cookies and lemonade, sat down in the circle of trust, and listened to Patrick recount for the 1000th time his depressingly miserable life story. How he had cancer in his balls, and they thought he was going to die, but he didn't die, and now here he is, a full-grown adult in a church basement in the 137th nicest city in America, divorced, addicted to video games, mostly friendless, eking out a meager living by exploiting his cancer-tastic past, slowly working his way toward a master's degree that will not improve his career prospects, waiting, as we all do, for the sword of Damocles to give him the relief that he escaped low those many years ago when cancer took both of his nuts, but spared what only the most generous soul would call his life. And you too might be so lucky. Then we introduced ourselves. Name, age, diagnosis, and how we're doing today. I'm Hazel, and I'd say when they get to me, 16. Thyroid originally, but with an impressive and long-settled satellite colony in my lungs. And I'm doing okay. Once we got around the circle, Patrick always asked if anyone wanted to share, and then began the circle jerk of support. Everyone talking about fighting and battling and winning and shrinking and scanning. To be fair to Patrick, he let us talk about dying too, but most of them weren't dying. Most would live into adulthood, as Patrick had, which meant there was quite a lot of competitiveness about it, with everybody wanting to beat not only cancer itself, but also the other people in the room. Like, I realize that this is irrational, but when they tell you that you have, let's say, a 20% chance of living 5 years, the math kicks in, and you figure that's 1 in 5, so you look around and think, as any healthy person would, I gotta outlast 4 of these bastards. The only redeeming facet of support group was this kid named Isaac, a long-faced, skinny guy with straight blonde hair swept over one eye. And his eyes were the problem. He had some fantastically improbable eye cancer. One eye had been cut out when he was a kid, and now he wore the kind of thick glasses that made his eyes, both the real one and the glass one, preternaturally huge. Like his whole head was basically just this fake eye and this real eye staring at you. It gave his gaze a certain terrifying intensity, but he was pleasantly sarcastic. From what I could gather on the rare occasions when Isaac shared with the group, a recurrence had placed his remaining eye in mortal peril. Isaac and I communicated almost exclusively through sighs. Each time someone discussed anti-cancer diets or snorting a ground-up shark fin or whatever, he'd glance over at me and sigh ever so slightly. I'd shake my head microscopically and exhale in response. So support group blew, and after a few weeks, I grew to be rather kicking and screaming about the whole affair. In fact, on the Sunday I made the acquaintance of Augustus Waters, I tried my level best to get out of support group while sitting on the couch with my mom in the third leg of a 12-hour marathon of the previous season's America's Next Top Model, which admittedly I had already seen, but still. Me. I refuse to attend support group. Mom, one of the symptoms of depression is disinterest in activities. Me, just let me watch America's Next Top Model. It's an activity. Mom, television is a passivity. Me, Mom, please. Mom, Hazel, you're a teenager. You're not a little kid anymore. You need to make friends, get out of the house, and live your life. Me, if you want me to be a teenager, don't send me to support group. Buy me a fake ID so I can go to clubs, drink vodka, and take pot. Mom, you don't take pot, for starters. Me, see, that's the kind of thing I'd know if you got me a fake ID. Mom, you're going to support group. Me, Mom, Hazel, you deserve a life. That shut me up, although I failed to see how attendance at support group met the definition of life. Still, I agreed to go after negotiating the right to record the 1.5 episodes of America's Next Top Model I'd be missing. I went to support group for the same reason that I'd allowed nurses with a mere 18 months of graduate education to poison me with exotically named chemicals. I wanted to make my parents happy. There's only one thing in this world shittier than biting it from cancer when you're 16, and that's having a kid who bites it from cancer. Mom pulled into the circular driveway behind the church at 4:56. I pretended to fiddle with my oxygen tank for a second, just to kill time. Do you want me to carry it in for you? No, it's fine, I said. The cylindrical green tank only weighed a few pounds, and I had this little steel cart to wheel it around behind me. It delivered a liter of oxygen to me each minute through a cannula, a transparent tube that split just beneath my neck, wrapped behind my ears, and then reunited in my nostrils. The contraption was necessary because my lungs sucked at being lungs. I love you, she said as I got out. You too, Mom. See you at 6. Make friends, she said through the rolled down window as I walked away. I didn't want to take the elevator because taking the elevator is a last days kind of activity at support group, so I took the stairs. I grabbed a cookie and poured some lemonade into a Dixie cup and then turned around. A boy was staring at me. I was quite sure I'd never seen him before. Long and leanly muscular, he dwarfed the molded plastic elementary school chair he was sitting in. Mahogany hair, straight and short. He looked my age, maybe a year older, and he sat with his tailbone against the edge of the chair, his posture aggressively poor, one hand half in a pocket of dark jeans. I looked away, suddenly conscious of my myriad insufficiencies. I was wearing old jeans, which had once been tight, but now sagged in weird places, and a yellow t-shirt advertising a band I didn't even like anymore. Also, my hair. I had this page boy haircut necessitated by former baldness, and I hadn't even bothered to, brush it. Furthermore, I had ridiculously fat chipmunked cheeks, another side effect of treatment. I looked like a normally proportioned person with a balloon for a head. This was not even to mention the cankle situation. And yet, I caught a glance to him, and his eyes were still on me. It occurred to me why they call it eye contact. I walked into the circle and sat down next to Isaac, 2 seats away from the boy. I glanced again. He was still watching me. Look, let me just say it. He was hot. A non-hot boy stares at you relentlessly, and it is at best awkward, and at worst, a form of assault. But a hot boy? Well, I pulled out my phone and clicked it so it would display the time. 4:59. The circle filled in with the unlucky 12 to 18s, and then Patrick started us out with the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The guy was still staring at me. I felt rather blushy. Finally, I decided that the proper strategy was to stare back. Boys do not have a monopoly on the staring business, after all. So I looked him over as Patrick acknowledged for the 1000th time his balllessness, etc., and soon it was a staring contest. After a while, the boy smiled, and then finally his blue eyes glanced away. When he looked back at me, I flicked my eyebrows up to say, I win. He shrugged. Patrick continued, and then finally it was time for the introductions. Isaac, perhaps you'd like to go first today. I know you're facing a challenging week. Yeah, Isaac said. I'm Isaac. I'm 17 and I've got surgery on Monday, after which I'll be blind. Not to complain or anything, because I know a lot of us have it a lot worse, but yeah, I mean, being blind does sort of suck. My girlfriend helps, though, and friends like Augustus. He nodded toward the boy, who now had a name. So, yeah, Isaac continued. He was looking at his hands, which he'd folded into each other like the top of a teepee. There's nothing you can do about it. We're here for you, Isaac, Patrick said. Let Isaac hear it, guys. And then we all, in a monotone, said, We're here for you, Isaac. Michael was next. He was 12. He had leukemia. He'd always had leukemia. He was okay. Or so he said. He'd taken the elevator. Lyda was 16 and pretty enough to be the object of the hot boy's eye. She was a regular, in a long remission from appendiceal cancer, which I had not previously known existed. She said, as she had every other time I'd attended support group, that she felt strong, which felt like bragging to me as the oxygen-drizzling nubs trickled my nostrils. There were 5 others before they got to him. He smiled a little when his turn came. His voice was low, smoky, and dead sexy. My name is Augustus Waters, he said. I'm 17. I had a little touch of osteosarcoma a year and a half ago, but I'm just here today at Isaac's request. And how are you feeling? Asked Patrick. Oh, I'm grand, Augustus Waters smiled with the corner of his mouth. I'm on a roller coaster that only goes up, my friend. When it was my turn, I said, my name's Hazel, I'm 16, thyroid with mets in my lungs. I'm okay. The hour proceeded apace. Fights were recounted, battles won amid wars sure to be lost. Hope was clung to. Families were both celebrated and denounced. It was agreed that friends just didn't get it. Tears were shed, comfort proffered. Neither Augustus Waters nor I spoke again until Patrick said, Augustus, perhaps you'd like to share your fears with the group. My fears? Yes. I fear oblivion, he said without a moment's pause. I fear it like the proverbial blind man who's afraid of the dark. Too soon, Isaac said, cracking a smile. Was that insensitive, Augustus asked. I can be pretty blind to other people's feelings. Isaac was laughing, but Patrick raised a chastening finger and said, Augustus, please, let's return to you and your struggles. You said you fear oblivion. I did, Augustus answered. Patrick seemed lost. Would anyone like to speak to that? I hadn't been in proper school in 3 years. My parents were my 2 best friends. My 3rd best friend was an author who did not know I existed. I'm not the hand-raising type. When there is a call for volunteers, it is my lifelong policy to demur politely. And yet, just this once, I decided to speak. I half raised my hand, and Patrick, his delight evident, immediately said, Hazel. I was, I'm sure he assumed, opening up, becoming part of the group. I looked over at Augustus Waters, who looked back at me. You could almost see through his eyes, they were so blue. There will come a time, I said, when all of us are dead, all of us. There will come a time when there are no human beings remaining to remember that anyone ever existed, or that our species ever did anything. There will be no one left to remember Aristotle or Cleopatra, let alone you. Everything that we did and built and wrote and thought and discovered will be forgotten, and all of this, I gestured encompassingly, will have been for naught. Maybe that time is coming soon, and maybe it is millions of years away, but even if we survive the collapse of our sun, we will not survive forever. There was a time before organisms experienced consciousness, and there will be a time after. And if the inevitability of human oblivion worries you, I encourage you to ignore it. God knows that's what everyone else does. I learned this from my aforementioned 3rd best friend, Peter Van Houten, the reclusive author of An Imperial Affliction, the book that is as close a thing as I have to a Bible. Peter Van Houten is the only person I've ever come across who seems to A, understand what it's like to be dying, and B, not have died. After I finished, there was quite a long period of silence as I watched a smile spread all the way across Augustus's face. Not the little crooked smiles of the boy trying to be sexy while he stared at me, but his real smile, too big for his face. God damn, Augustus said quietly. Aren't you something else?